Hey, Super Dude here. Hope y'all had a good day, week, month, and all that. I've been watching a lot of Avatar recently, and that's a pretty neato show. We also got a new cat that we've named Coke Zero, but we've taken to calling him Prince Zero in honor of Mr. Dark and Brooding over here. I've been busy, is what I'm saying, with life and also with Avatar. But cats and Avatar don't actually have anything to do with this video. I'm not sure why I brought it up. Anyway, anime. In my first video talking about anime, I kinda swung for the fences, talking about everything from how I got into anime, some of my favorite shows and genres, and even some of my complaints with common anime trends, and it resulted in a video that was contentious and controversial, which with a name like gentrification of anime romance is always gonna be. In the back half of that video, I decided to talk about my problems with fan service, and that was not a decision I made lightly. I knew it would make people mad, so I tried my best to be reasonable and to make myself well understood. But this does beg the question, why did I do that? Why did I intentionally put my hand in the pain box by poking otaku's uncritical love of fan service? Well, because I wanted you to know who I was. I laid out all my broad strokes opinions on anime, my upbringing, my touchstones, my likes and dislikes, so you could decide all in one place if this was a voice you wanted to listen to. So, if you're here now, listening to some white boy's takes on anime, at least some of you are here because of that video, and I thank you for sticking around for so long. So, let me restate my position. I, broadly, don't like fan service. I find it distracting and at times annoying. I come to anime to watch interesting stories and lovely animation, and fan service can be a representation of the latter, but not typically the former. Makes sense when you think about it. The term fan service is meant to imply titillating artwork that's put there for the fans, not necessarily because it's useful to the story or serves the characters, but because the fans would like it. No more, no less. True blue fan service, where the plot and art exists as excuses to get you from one horny moment to the next, I'm sorry, but that's just not for me. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are plenty of shows that use their fan service to great cinematic and narrative effects. Kill la Kill is the premier example of fanservice utilized to tell a story about our relationship with clothing, sexuality, femininity, and societal norms. And despite how sexualized the central characters are, most people don't talk smack about Kill la Kill or its fanservice. You may dislike fanservice, but nobody disrespects the queen. Anyway, fanservice isn't an unambiguous evil, and I hope to talk about some shows with horny elements that are nonetheless brilliantly written, beautifully animated, and overall exceptional pieces of art, starting with a recent release, and the reason why this video exists, Call of the Night. But first, content warnings for discussion of sexual violence found throughout this video. Viewer discretion is advised, especially for the final anime discussed here. You've been warned. Also, shout out to that one guy who asked me if this channel is hornier now all of a sudden. It is. I'm sorry. I write about what I'm obsessing over, and this is just what I'm thinking about now. Anyway, Call of the Night. Call of the Night is an interesting series from top to bottom and takes a different angle at portraying monster romance. You know, stuff like Twilight or Shape of Water, where the monster is a sympathetic beast, or one of the good ones, as is the case with Twilight. Vampires are dangerous, but these vampires are better than the rest, which means you can smooch them. Shape of Water uses the metaphor of the monster to talk about self-love among the marginalized, and Twilight features vampires that are trying to be the best of them by only drinking from animals. Vegan vampires, they call themselves. Call of the Night, however, is different. It's definitely sympathetic to the monster, but not because the vampire is a misunderstood beast. Call of the Night's vampires are exactly the dangerous blood-sucking predators of lore. Instead, it is our protagonist, who's different from other monster romance flicks. Call of the Night centers the 14-year-old middle school boy Koyomori in the midst of an identity crisis. School used to give him some sense of purpose and community, but after some love trouble, he just doesn't see the point of it anymore. Any of it. This disinterest leaves him unable to sleep at night, because a night's rest would mean another meaningless day at school. So he plays hooky. He stays home, and on one fateful night, decides to explore the city on his own. Hello? He decides to explore the city on his own, where he is immediately caught in the jaws of a predator, and lured to a second location where his life will never be the same. Nazuna Nanaxa is a vampire who uses her physique and easygoing demeanor to draw in unsuspecting humans to feed on. When Yomori goes to sleep, or pretends to at least, he's had a lot of practice, she does her business, drinking from Yomori while he's still conscious. Oopsie. With the cat out of the bag, Nazuna just comes clean on the whole vampire business, leading Yamori to make the completely reasonable decision to try and become a vampire. Think about it, an immortal life, free of school, with powers and all the time in the world to do what you wish? You may not be able to go in the sun, but who cares when the night is so colorful and bright? This is a life-changing decision. Well, even that's inaccurate. This is a death-defining decision that Yamori is making pretty casually, but Nazuna doesn't mind. She'll help him become a vampire so he can see the world as she does, as a land of unbridled possibility and fun. This is the initial framing of the series, but it's a little too simple and clean, isn't it? And that's entirely the point. Everything in Call of the Night is presented from Yamori's point of view, which includes his warped perception of right and wrong, good and evil, exciting and dull. Just look at the color palette of the day and nighttime segments. The day is drab. What color that is here is muted, lifeless, but the night? Vibrant, spectacular, beautiful. Even dawn and dusk are treated with more visual splendor than the day. Yamori thinks he's on the fast track to the easy life with his vampire gig, but it turns out one does not simply become a vampire. Turning into a vampire requires the thrall to fall in love with their sire in order to turn, and Yamori's never fallen in love before. Yes, this is a romance anime. I'm recommending a romance to you, mark your super bingo card, but romantic feelings don't come easy to either of these two dorks, so they're on a rocky road from the start. Oh, and also, every human in the show thinks Yamori's plan is rash, perhaps even stupid, and from the human perspective, of course it is. The Call of the Night isn't from the average human's perspective, is it? Yamori is a 14-year-old boy, a child in the midst of puberty, the crossroads of adolescence and adulthood. This is the time in anyone's life where you're questioning all of your assumptions, and also at your most dangerously ignorant. You think you know everything, but you don't. Not really. You know just enough to get you in trouble. This is the sophomoric mindset on full display, and it is this confident ignorance that sees Yamori surrounded by vampires on all sides, but most notably Nazuna, a vampire that is multiple times his age and he has nonetheless tied himself to, romantically. Sexually. Because drinking blood is a very erotic act, how often do you leave your neck available for random folks to get a nibble at you? Humans unconsciously tuck their neck in when they're around people they don't trust, you know. So to do the opposite is pretty revealing of your relationship with that person. I trust you. I love you. I want you. And a vampire is a parasite on that trust. They slip into your life and make you love them until one day you invite them into your home of your own accord and reveal your neck to the monster. Their patience finally rewarded, your trust violated. That is what Nazuna is. But even outside of the whole vampire thing, Nazuna's an experienced older woman who's fooling around with this child, trying to make this kid exactly like her. This is literally grooming. And now is as good a time as any for me to step in and tell you that all of this problematic stuff that I just got done talking about, it's fine. It's totally fine. This is a story, you see, and stories exist to allow us to explore ideas and themes that would be dangerous to see in real life. That's the entire basis of the horror genre, after all, experiencing traditionally dangerous feelings in the safety of your seat. Surely the same must hold true for stories featuring sexual danger or violence as well. So even if this situation is dangerous or morally wrong in real life, a story can still explore these topics and should if we want to learn about potentially dangerous topics in a safe environment. Not that every story has to have a moral attack. You get what I mean. Depiction does not equal endorsement. Moving on. Now, the show isn't trying to say that all adults are dangerous predators or anything like that. Not to be a Nazuna apologist, but when the chips are down, she does try to be good to Yamori and protect him from people or vampires that mean him genuine harm. But even if her intentions were pure, Call of the Night depicts a romance between a vampire and a child from the perspective of that child, and it has some revealing ideas to share about this relationship. Yamori lusts after Nazuna, the camera often hanging on revealing shots of our heroine as Yamori sheepishly gets a peek in, and Nazuna knows this. She takes advantage of this fact to tease Yamori, make him jealous, make him uncomfortable, or just to play with him. And he doesn't really have the tools to deal with these emotions yet. Their relationship is constantly framed as one where one side holds the power and experience and reveals these new experiences to the other, naive and growing adolescent character. Whether exploring romance or aspects of the nightlife or the world of vampires, Yamori's world is broadened through this other person, a vampire who, we must recall, is gaining blood from this relationship. An act which has been associated with sex for more than a century now, and Call of the Night also thinks of blood in those terms, referring to this pact between them as a physical relationship. Regardless, this adult figure gives Yamori a lot of knowledge and confidence in himself. Confidence enough to stand up to some guys who are hitting on his girlfriend. He defends another vampire from a creepy stalker. He even solves a crime at one point. But I must remind you, this is the false confidence of a teenager. He thinks he knows how the world works and his place in it. He even thinks he understands how vampires work. Only for episode 11 to come along and show Yamori how little he truly knows. There are a handful of human characters found in the show, 2 of which are Yamori's old friends from school. They decide to visit their school after hours for some spooky ghost fun. It was set to be a good night, full of fun memories, if not for the final stop. The classroom of a teacher who went missing about 10 years back, who's said to reappear in his old haunt in the dead of night. And there he is, a monster, prowling his old school grounds, trying his best to contain his wild bloodlust. The last rational thing this man says before he strikes is a fact that Yamori lives in opposition to. You shouldn't be here. The night is dangerous. He attacks Asuka, the girl of the group, pinning her to the ground. The other boy, Mahiru, immediately rushes to her aid, but Yamori is trapped in place. This crazed animal, the way he moves, his teeth, his lust, it all feels so familiar. This is the first time Yamori comes into contact with the monstrous side of vampires, and it shatters his worldview. He's only listened to what the vampires have told him about their condition. He knows nothing of their darker sides, the parts vampires don't like to talk about, or perhaps don't even know about themselves. How long can they go without blood? What happens when a vampire is truly starving? Humans need their blood to live. Does that mean vampires can go too far? Can vampires kill people? He is paralyzed in this moment as the realities of the vampire come crashing into his fantasy. This is the central flaw of Yamori's character. School was fun until it wasn't, and now he just doesn't see the point in going anymore. Complicated truths, difficult feelings, the gray of living life. He rejects these complications and instead finds solace in the arms of a vampire who promised infinite fun and an immortal life after death. But vampires aren't black and white either, and Yamori will spend the rest of this season struggling with his ignorance. I'd also like to point out that this vampire is a man. Isn't that curious? This isn't the first time we've seen a male vampire, and it won't be the last, but when the time comes to show the terrible power a vampire can wield against their human prey, it is a man against a woman. In a show that is constantly exploring the dark corners of dating between teenagers who are just learning their place in the world and the adults who can take advantage of that fact, we will spend the whole series exploring how this affects our boyish protagonist. But for a woman, the visual language is far more fraught and immediate. It takes seasons of television to demonstrate how this is bad for a boy, where it takes a single scene for a girl. This is how powerful the visual is, and how we as a society understand the differences between a man and a woman. Children are at risk, no matter their sex. But in the minds of the public, sexual violence is a crime perpetuated on women instead of everyone. This is part of what I think Call of the Night and our next anime on this list are exploring in trying to tell the audience. Boys are also targets, and ones we often fail to even recognize as victims. But we'll talk about that in more detail later. These children are saved by the detective, the final human character so far, and our antagonist for the first season. If Yamori is aligned with vampires, then it makes sense that our Van Helsing equivalent is the villain. Yamori's pretty shaken by what he just witnessed, and when the two next meet, the detective uses this moment of weakness to shake him further. She knows everything about him, from his dreams to his lack of success in the love department, and she asks him the hard questions. Do you think you'll even be able to drink blood? It's pretty grisly business, you know. And what if you can't turn into a vampire? What will you do? You already know too much. If you aren't a vampire, you're a liability, and in that state, the vampires would probably want you dead. She overwhelms him with information, questions, poking at his fears and doubts, and then tries to soothe him to her way of thinking, in a more overt but nonetheless accurate depiction of grooming. This doesn't work, but Yamori leaves the confrontation having learned nothing. He went intending to learn what she knew about vampires, but she was in control the whole time. He didn't ask a single question, and he was played for a fool. If the vampires are supposed to represent the more knowledgeable and capable adults, then it follows that not all adults are dangerous. The detective certainly preys on Yamori and threatens him too, but she doesn't want to hurt him. From her perspective, she's saving his life. Vampires have the capacity for violence, and sure, you could argue there's an inherent violence in drinking someone's blood, but not all vampires are created equal. Nanaxa never raises a hand against Yamori or any of the other children, but the same can't be said for her kin. Every other vampire Yamori meets threatens to kill him or forcibly turn him, and he always manages to weasel his way out or be saved by a passerby or Nazuna herself, but it's just another example of Yamori's misplaced confidence that he so casually walks into these moments of literal mortal peril and thinks he's on even footing with the vampires. He can sass and talk back to Nazuna because she cares about him. The other vampires don't care a lick for Yamori. Actually, a lot of them like the idea of forcibly turning Yamori under Nazuna's nose like it's a competition. Oh, you don't love Nana yet, Yamori? I'm sure I could make you fall for me faster. Or hell, literally force you to love me. That works just as well. A situation Yamori finds himself in immediately after his encounter with the detective. From one grooming to another. From the writing to the color of each individual scene, everything in Call of the Night is from Yamori's point of view. And it's a very biased view of the world. Standing at the crossroads of adolescence, he's gotten himself involved with a dangerous crowd. But he doesn't see it that way. He thinks they've revealed a new world to him, a more exciting and interesting one, but it's not. This is a more fraught and violent world, but that doesn't make it better, just different. Yamori's teenage confidence gets him deep into hot water, and he doesn't realize it until the first time he gets burned, and then loses encounter after encounter as people stronger, smarter, and more experienced than him use his lack of experience to their advantage. Season 2 explores more of these topics, but also complicates them, as any good writing should. Introduce a tidy, clean metaphor, and then complicate things. Writing 101. There's a stronger focus on emotional connection this season, as the feelings between these two continue to blossom, leaving the infatuation stage behind for some true attempts at romance, and the other vampires get a focus too, before the detective returns and goes on to be the defining character of this season. Spoilers for the end of Season 2, skip ahead like seconds if you're not there yet, but Yamori finally realizes 25 episodes in that adults are just a bit further along in their lives than kids. They don't have the answers. They don't have some magical insight on what the good life is. Whether alive or undead, there's no escaping the complicated twists and turns of living. Having reached such a solid thesis by the end of Season 2, I can't imagine where we're going next. I think we're about to enter a new paradigm for this series, where the entire show is going to change direction, and perhaps the metaphor of the vampire and the relationship between Yamori and Nazuna is about to take on new meaning. And now that I'm editing this video, I can tell you that I've read all of Call of the Night now, so to give you a taste of what's to come, one of your criticisms of this script might be that Nazuna is pretty good. She's a good person. So my argument about this being grooming or taboo, it doesn't really hold weight when Nazuna is such a good person. Sure, I'm sure that the rest of this series will continue to be that way, and we're never going to see negative depictions of child-adult romance. So while you might feel that what I've said so far doesn't really hold true because Nazuna and Yamori have a good relationship, we're going places. Here's hoping for a Season 3. The fanservice in Call of the Night acts as a honey trap for the protagonist and the viewer, drawing you into the enchanting arms of a vampire, where you're actually at your most vulnerable. Nazuna may be a good friend, and Yamori's about in the best spot that a human could be in for his situation, but no other vampire is like Nazuna. He was lucky, and as the school attack well demonstrates, being unlucky could cost you your life. Let's move on to another show that highlights a young boy being used by his superiors, Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man is exploring many of the same themes as Call of the Night: power dynamics within a relationship, the grooming of adolescent boys, but with a wildly different character archetype. Yamori is very confident in himself, whereas Denji is kind of head empty as a consequence of his upbringing, or lack thereof. For some background, Denji was a young boy who lived with his mother. In pay off a myriad of debts, the Yakuza began to use Denji as their devil hunter, which, it's actually complicated to explain to you what a devil is. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of this video, but just know that devils are essentially monsters with a really cool power ranking system. If you're watching this and you haven't watched Chainsaw Man, holy hell, go watch it, it's awesome. Anyway, Denji is a devil hunter for the Yakuza, so he can pay off his debts, where he lives an extremely meager and dangerous existence until he is eventually killed. Then his devil dog Pochita decides to give Denji another chance at life so they can both live out the dreams Denji always talked about. Stuff like 2 types of jam on toast and maybe being near a girl one time, you know. From here forward, Denji becomes the human-devil hybrid thanks to his heart being replaced with the chainsaw devil, which makes him functionally immortal, as well as making him super important and now all the single ladies want to put a ring on it. The first woman Denji meets after becoming Chainsaw Man is Makima, who immediately takes him in as her newest pet and gives him a job at public safety, an arm of the government whose sole focus is the extermination of devils. With stable pay, all the food he can eat, and I must stress, a super cutie like Makima looking after him, what's not to love about this new life? Well, actually, a lot of things. Let's talk about Denji's psychology for a moment. Before Denji became Chainsaw Man, Denji was just barely meeting his needs for survival. A spoonful of sugar in flower water was considered a delectable and glamorous treat for him, like he had one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel. So becoming Chainsaw Man was the single best thing that ever happened to him, giving him the skills necessary to join public safety, providing him with a stable job and the ability to make all the jam toast he wants. But this is also a curse. For one, devils want to kill him now for some reason, which puts Denji in loads of constant danger, and is where all the fights in the series come from. But more important to this video's topic, Denji has been alone since he was a little boy. With no parents or guardians who actually cared about him, and under constant survival pressure, Denji had to figure out how best to survive on his own, which meant a ruthless pursuit of money and food to survive at any cost. When someone offers Denji food, he takes it. Doesn't matter what it is or the consequences of taking this offer, he must take it. Otherwise, he may not have enough calories to survive. He's been that destitute in his life. Now extend that logic to everything he does, and you can see that Denji's been trained by the Yakuza, and now Makima, as an attack dog who'll do whatever they say for the pleasure of continuing to exist. Denji's actually in a position where he could refuse. He could choose what he wants to do now, but he can't refuse his programming. It's kept him alive this long, why would it fail him now? Denji is referred to as a dog multiple times in the first season by both the Yakuza and Makima, and Denji doesn't think too much of it. Don't get me wrong, Denji would rather not be called a dog, but if Makima says she'll take care of him, then he may as well bark when she wants him to, right? This is the second part of Denji's newfound curse. Denji's survival skills are practically worthless in the social setting. Sure, his survival instincts have kept him alive so far, but it is this exact instinct which public safety can take advantage of. Denji chases after all of his desires as if they're the only things keeping him going. And with such an obvious motivator, one he often tells people as he meets them, others can easily thwart him as a result. Sometimes this is a joke, like Aki offering Power and Denji a stick of gum so they'll stop calling him slurs. Sometimes it's sad, like Denji's inability to tell Himino no to a kiss during the company dinner. He doesn't want Makima to see him kiss another woman. He does love Makima, after all, that would be awkward, but he also doesn't have the willpower to tell Himino no. And sometimes it is the central theme of part 1, how easy it is for Denji, and by extension young men, to be enchanted by older women. Every single woman in Denji's life attempts to kill him, and nearly all of them have also offered him sexual favors as rewards for good behavior. Power offers her chest, she tries to kill him. Himino offers a French kiss to Denji, later conspires to kill him, even later tries to sleep with him. Makima and Reze are a bit more complicated both in this regard, but I'm not going to tell you about it because the story's not done and the movie just came out. So if you're watching this and want to know more about Reze specifically, watch her movie. Denji's a bit of an extreme case as far as teenage boys go, given his particular brainworms and traumas, but teenagers rarely have the mental fortitude to consent. Kids aren't known for their impulse control. Hell, plenty of adults struggle from similar afflictions. There are entire industries that exist for the sole purpose of weathering down your impulse control for their gain, so I can't really fault Denji for being a little too horny. Teens tend to be like that. But Denji is Chainsaw Man, an awesome and powerful hybrid who seems to be uniquely feared among the devils, which makes him a dangerous enemy and useful ally. The world has always hated Denji. He understands adversity. He knows how to fight the devils, but he doesn't know what to do with flattery. There are multiple ways to win against Chainsaw Man, and Makima chose to go through his arteries. Sorry, I meant his heart. Love is what that was dumb. Women offer themselves to Denji, and he falls for it every time, because Denji doesn't understand what love is. The first time Denji gets what he wants carnally is with power, and he discovers that it doesn't feel as good as he thought it would. And that's because he didn't care about power, but he didn't understand that yet. It is Makima who goes on to explain the concept of intimacy to Denji, but I want you to pay attention to how she does it. She tells him to use his senses, to pay attention to your partner, their smells, their touch, but she's demonstrating on herself, allowing, or really guiding Denji towards touching her ears, biting his thumb, before finally going for the killing blow. It's extremely intimate, and it's an excellently taught lesson to be sure, but also notice how this completely endears Denji to Makima. This will not be the last time Denji learns from Makima's influence, and he learns lots of important lessons from her. She's a good teacher. As I said with Nazuna earlier, adults are more experienced, and therefore can teach a great deal about the world to those under their charge. But Makima always imparts lessons in a manner that draws Denji closer to her. She's not teaching him to help him improve as a person, she's drawing him into her trap. Makima is a predator of a different sort, using Denji's puppy dog love to her advantage, wielding him as a weapon against devil kind. Her methods are manipulative, but if it's for the greater good of the world, then it's fine. Right? Himino is another example that looms large from the first season. Himino loses her inhibitions when she gets drunk, which after this particular company dinner results in her taking Denji home with her. He's dazed, a bit sickly, in need of some water, and there's this cute older woman on top of him, asking him if he wants to do it. Remember everyone, Denji doesn't like Himino this way. He likes Makima. He's already learned this lesson from Power, and his first kiss was ruined by Himino earlier today. This is the last thing he wants. He wants to be with Makima. But at this moment, the temptation is almost too much to bear. There's a reason why there are laws against adults dating teens, at least in the States. It's something I said earlier about Yamori in Call of the Night. Teenagers think they know, but they don't. Denji wants to wait and have his first time with Makima, but in the face of this temptation, he can't think rationally. He tries to. As Himino is working his shirt off, he's rationalizing all the reasons he shouldn't go through with this, especially not with Himino, and then he sees her face, and the thinking stops. He consents. Enthusiastically consents. Even though he doesn't want it. This is a pretty fantastic demonstration of why teenagers can't give consent. Sometimes the weight of temptation is just too strong, and they'll go against their best judgment, maybe even their safety, all for the taste of something sweet. And some of you may be thinking, that's actually a bad demonstration of my point, because adults do that too. Cute girl got me acting irrationally as one of the leading causes of cheating. This isn't specific to teenagers. And that's very true. You can have poor impulse control regardless of age, as I stated earlier, but still, you're right. So let's lessen the stakes a bit. I've already pointed out Denji initially went with Makima for the promise of food. He fights the Eternity Devil for weeks for the promise of Himino's French kiss. Remove the Chainsaw Man context, and these are all examples of a teenager's wants being used to drive action. Candy offered out of the back of a van. Reward. Driving childish action. This is a behavior even well-meaning adults can take advantage of. Finish your broccoli and you can play games later, I remember hearing all the time as a child. But not all adults have your best interests at heart like that broccoli example. Either offering rewards that can harm you, or the actions they would have you take benefit them to your detriment. Children often don't know the difference. This is why good guiding guardians are so important. A luxury Denji has never known. To summarize, poor impulse control isn't a child-specific problem, but children are also naive to the world in a way that makes their lack of self-control uniquely dangerous to them. Let me state it plainly for those in the back. This is statutory assault, and this is grooming. We have to remember that Denji is 16-ish years old, Himino somewhere in her mid-20s, and Makima's a big old age question mark, but she's likely older than Himino at the very least. And yet, there are some who would think this age disparity is actually dope as hell. There's this thing that seems to happen around boys where teens that get with older women are considered hot shots. What a Chad that teen is, and everyone thinks it rocks, and the teen in this scenario is treated like a hero. But they're not. It's traumatizing, and often scary, as the kid has no power to control their relationship. Fans of Chainsaw Man often get into arguments over this sort of thing because our societal perceptions are powerful. People have a hard time accepting the fact that Denji is an abused boy, physically and psychologically abused by the mafia, and now he is experiencing a new form of abuse. Sexual abuse, emotional abuse, love bombing that he's, at least as of season 1, powerless to stop. Makima being a babe doesn't make it better, and actually plays into our biases around this sort of thing. It doesn't matter if she's hot, it's still abuse. There are an embarrassing amount of Chainsaw Man fans that fail to see the series in this light. The reading comprehension devil is a truly powerful devil, but there's value in viewing the series as a story of a very powerful boy being groomed by hot women for their own gain. I won't say more than that in case you haven't read the manga, but I hope the latest Chainsaw Man movie is great, and you really should read the rest. It's fantastic. And don't fall for Makima's tricks. Think about it this way. Anytime you see fan art of Makima online with an even more sexualized physique and people in the comments are thirsting over her, they're under her control as well. A character who's so charismatic and attractive that the honey trap Denji finds himself in works on the audience as well, that's some synergistic writing. Which brings us to the final topic of the video, Dandadan. Dandadan is an anime that defies description, because it tone switches so much that it's hard to pin down what it's trying to be. It's horror, it's drama, it's comedy, it's definitely more than a little supernatural, but at the heart of it all, Dandadan is an action romance. Mark your bingo card if you haven't already. Momo Ayase is a popular and attractive high school girl who believes in ghosts. And Okarun, real name Ken Takakura, is a meek dork from the same school and grade who believes in aliens. Despite both of them believing in supernatural entities, they both think the other's cryptid of choice is fake. So they make a wager. Okarun will go to a haunted locale, and Momo a place with loads of alien sightings to see which one is right. Small problem. They're both right. Momo's captured, Okarun's possessed, Dandadan happens. Strap in, because this is going to be a wild ride. Actually, while I have you in this montage, each of these shows are really pretty. Excellent animation and movement, with Chainsaw Man being some of the most visually distinct animation of the last few years, and that's saying something. Though it did kind of cause a huge controversy. That isn't the purpose of this video, so I'm not going to talk about it. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to write about it. Pause if you want to read. But Dandadan is an animation knockout, animated by Science Saru with a director who has a strong eye towards film techniques, and it shows. Swamp John has done a lot of analysis on this if you want to see someone get into the weeds on this subject, and you should, their work is fantastic. But Science Saru basically treats the anime as if the camera were actually in the space, animating pans, zooms, tracking shots, and zollies to give the impression of a real place shot on a real camera, without pissing off the fan base in the process. Chainsaw Man 0, Dandadan 1 in that regard. But even outside of that killer animation, Science Saru's adaptational choices help elevate the original text in ways the manga just doesn't have access to. A perfect example of this is episode 17, wherein Momo and Okarun are in the backseat of the car, and Momo reaches out to hold Okarun's hand. As Momo goes to make her move, they enter a tunnel. Darkness coats them, and an amber glow bakes the scene. Some soft piano is playing, and the character's speech is hushed yet super crisp and loud, as if they're both speaking into your ear. The original version has 8 panels across 2 pages, and you'll also note the lack of the tunnel. Yukinobu Tatsu didn't have the luxury of color or time on the manga page, whereas the medium of animation is both time-bound and rich with color. Science Saru chose to animate the scene with a more intimate color palette, and really luxuriate in these 8 panels, spread them out over time so that we can spend some quality time in the headspace of these 2 characters. This tunnel may as well be another world, where these 2 don't have to worry about what others might think. They can just hold hands and be happy together. And then they leave the tunnel, Gigi shouts to bring the two out of their stupor, and we're back to normal. This is a consistent strength of the adaptation, making the Dandadan anime a distinct work that stands on its own from the source material, in a good way. Oftentimes, an anime exists purely as a vehicle to drive viewers to read the manga, with its lush artwork and story that's tens, maybe hundreds of chapters past anything in animation. A common refrain I hear in the Chainsaw Man community is, "I can't wait to see Part 2 character animated in 2032, or something like that. But the Dandadan anime stands on its own, and is more than just a manga advertisement, and that's all thanks to Science Sato's care and dedication. This is a fantastic studio. Watch Ping Pong the animation if you haven't, and also get your hands off Aizuken. I love that one. But Dandadan isn't the easiest show to get into from the jump, thanks to a pervasive theme throughout the series, which is communicated, at least in part, through fanservice. There are two layers to the show's fanservice, the benign and jokey stuff, which is honestly a rare occurrence. Characters are in their underwear a lot for plot reasons, allowing for some haha you're naked gags here or there, and also Seiko kinda just looks like that, but that's about it for the benign stuff. The other layer is far more insidious, and it's where a lot of people will find difficulty with Dandadan. Consent is an overarching theme in this story. Recall that this is a romance. The first episode shows Momo falling for Ken. Ken falls for her at some point soon after, and these two chuckle dorks are playing a cute little game of getting closer to each other. The previously mentioned hand-holding scene is yet again a perfect example of this. Momo wants to hold Ken's hand, but he's a shy dweebus who rarely makes the first move, so she makes the move. She tests his boundary, and he doesn't say no. He doesn't physically stop her, so she holds his hand. Only then does he speak up to ask what's going on, but not in a way to suggest he doesn't like it. He's clarifying what's happening right now. Again, shy dweebus. Momo acts coy through all of this, not giving a direct answer, but words aren't the only way they're communicating here. He's bashful, she's coy, and they're both more than a little embarrassed, but they want this. In terms of consent, this is pretty solid stuff. Kids testing each other's boundaries and figuring out what the other's comfortable with as they learn what it means to love each other. Our two leads are written as role models for other kids on how one can manifest their sexual or romantic desires in a healthy way. The villains, naturally, are the opposite. Ghosts and aliens both seem to derive great power from humanity's loins, so they're always after them. Turbo Granny steals Okudun's balls, and Momo's under threat of graphic sexual violence from the first episode so the aliens can steal her power. This is a plot explanation for the consent theming. In fiction, the reason for assault is that power is stored in the balls, but in terms of story construction, it means our heroes are always under threat of sexual assault. The first episode is the most explicit in that regard, and I understand if you bounced off of the show as a result. I nearly did myself. And while it's never as explicit as that first episode, the thread holds through nearly every fight the heroes go through. The aliens want Okudun's pickle, so does this guy. The end of the first season sees Momo once again under threat of sexual violence, even in cases where the enemy doesn't want anything involving genitals or power, as is the case with the evil eye. The cinematic language is still fraught. Momo pinned to a wall, her clothes torn off before an attempt on her life. This visual framing is no accident. When these two want something from the other, they make sure it's okay before proceeding. They genuinely care for the other's well-being, so they check in with one another. They try to improve for the other's benefit, and they're willing to move at whatever pace is necessary for the two of them to work out. Not to say that it isn't without bumps. Is Okudun confident enough to take that next step? Is Momo able to accept Deltarune's affection right now, or is she keeping up appearances? They're slowly figuring it out, but some people are ruled by their desires. They don't control themselves, or don't care for the consequences of their actions, and they take what they want. Ghosts are corrupted forms of previous humans, and the sympathetic ones are all driven by a powerful desire. A desire to protect others, to play outside, or to love a child as their own. But those desires are corrupted. Ghosts are essentially an obsessive form of desire in this framework, whereas aliens are a more directly malicious form of desire. They take what they want, even if you don't want them to, even if it'll hurt you. They don't care. They just want what you have. There's a callousness from the aliens, as they only think of humans as fuel towards their own ambitions. Our bodies are a means towards their desires. So it's telling that when the monsters are on the verge of success, the camera reveals their evil. Most of the time. If Okurun is in a sexually compromised position, unfortunately the camera doesn't mark this as notable. The whole video has been stressing that fact. For boys a series, for girls a scene. But oh boy, if Momo's in danger, you can feel it. The camera leers over Momo's body, showing her off in a way that's suggestive of fan service, but everything else is sending the wrong signals. There's little music. The color of the scene is hostile. In case you don't know, green light doesn't really happen a lot in nature, so it's a quick communicator to the viewer that something's wrong. Used to great effect here. Momo is actively and aggressively resisting this, and again, the visual language here is screaming assault at the viewer. This is not good, but it's still accentuating Momo's body because this is about desire. The aliens want Momo's body, even if Momo would never give herself willingly. This leads to a show where the characters commonly end up in their knickers, despite the tone not matching the visual. The characters reach new levels of understanding about love and connecting with others because of the lessons they learn from the monsters they face, an example of what not to do. And of course, all of this combines to make a raunchy comedy about love and connection while fighting monsters who want to sexually assault them. Thematically resonant sex hijinks with a tone that can swing wildly from dead serious to complete goober crap. You may think that wild tone is inappropriate for a show that's about consent and non-consent, but it's actually essential to why Dandadan works as a series. Falling in love, especially as a teenager, is awkward, goofy. That awkwardness is the peak demonstration of adolescence, and yet at times making yourself understood is the most important thing in the world to get right. And sexual assault cuts through all of that like a knife, being a starkly awful truth that we must protect ourselves from. Sexual violence comes in many forms, and it can affect everyone, including children, and including boys, even if our perceptions of men cause us to view these victims differently. They aren't. But these kids become each other's support group, and they come together to help Okurun and each other become stronger, so that someone like Turbo Granny could never hurt any of them again. Turbo Granny is actually another interesting aspect of this boy-girl dichotomy. Granny assaults Okurun, and yet she's the spirit who watches over the ghosts of girls who died from assault. Granny has witnessed the aftermath of many sex crimes, which has colored her perception of the genders. She has a soft spot for Momo and is often seen saving her life, but has to learn to care for Ken, and this is after initially harming him. But that's a bit of an aside. While we're in aside territory, though, sexual violence is often employed in romance shows as a thematically resonant obstacle for the feminine lead to suffer through to eventually be saved by our masculine hero. We've seen it dozens of times, and it can be anywhere from actually explicit sexual violence to two guys just harassing a high schooler. It's a very common trope. But Dandadan doesn't really do this. Well, it kind of sets up a similar situation. In that first episode, Okurun does come to Momo's rescue, but he utterly fails to save her. Don't fret though, dear viewer, because Momo's psychic powers awaken shortly thereafter, and she saves herself. Okurun works throughout the series to become strong enough to be that classic male hero for our damsel, but Momo's not a damsel. She's a capable psychic, saving Okurun multiple times, and is often the one coming up with the plans that eventually defeat their cryptid foes. Momo is not some cardboard cutout of a woman for our male hero to pursue. She's a fully constructed character in her own right, which may sound like a low bar to clear, but that doesn't always happen in shonen animes. All this to say that Dandadan's a well-constructed series, a romance action comedy that's deeply engaged in the topic of consent, with a tone that matches the brain space of the teenagers it depicts. Awkward, funny, dorky, and sometimes overly dramatic and deadly serious. It's a teenage romance that understands, from the teenage perspective, what it feels like to be in love, which is easy to lose sight of once we all become adults. Great show, fantastic animation, and you never know what to expect from episode to episode. 7 out of 7, everyone should watch it. And you know, all of these shows are actually 7 out of 7s. The animation is great, the writing is excellent, and they each do a great job folding their heavy topics into the story in a way that doesn't bring the show down. Sexual violence is a terrible thing, and stories that dwell on that topic can be quite dark and dour as a result. And there's nothing wrong with exploring these themes in that way. It makes intuitive sense to adopt a weighty tone for a weighty topic. But in stories made for children, and as these are all shonen, they're definitionally aimed at boys and young men, a more delicate approach is needed. Show that this is serious, but keep it light. Keep it exciting and engaging for younger audiences while discussing sexual violence on a more metaphorical level. And of course, since these are all shonen animes, fanservice helps keep the boys at the table. Fanservice fuses with sexual violence to issue a warning to the boys of the world. Be careful of those who promise you the world. Sometimes adults do not have your best interests in mind, and it's up to you and those you trust to keep yourselves safe. I didn't know at the beginning of this video that I accidentally watched a bunch of shows with this through line, but in hindsight, yeah, this is one of the ways fanservice could be made appealing to me. Make it serve a message about safety, while also basing that sexuality in the desires of our protagonist, or the demented desires of the villains. Hopefully this video proved interesting, and if you haven't seen all of these shows, you really should. Every single one is a perfect 7 out of 7, a jackpot, if you will, and I'm excited to see what's in store for these characters, these studios, and the people who wrote these stories. Hey, I'm doing a rapid fast outro. It's been a long time since I've done one of these, but the reason why I stopped in the first place was because I was listening to people's advice, because they were like, I don't like that you do that, and I was listening, but seeing as I recently decided to do this part-time anyway, it doesn't matter what you think, I'm gonna make what I want to make. I'm an anti-fan service guy, a fan service anti, if you will, an anti-fan, I don't like it. And the reason why I don't like it is because it usually doesn't serve the story, it's usually just a visual element that's meant to keep, it's like jangly keys in front of the viewer, and I'm just not really about that. But if it serves the story and the characters well, you could in fact make me enjoy it. Kill la Kill is an example, Beastars is an example. There are plenty of examples of this, but for this video I decided to talk about Call of the Night, Chainsaw Man, and Dandadan, all of which use fan service to talk about the concept of sexual violence for the shonen audience. Call of the Night and Chainsaw Man both feature boyish protagonists fraternizing with older women, which gets them into dangerous, sometimes life-threatening situations, and Dandadan is a romance that depicts the how-tos and how-nots of consent through the metaphor of punching ghosts and the creatures from above. They're colorful, beautiful, engaging, and exciting shows that are exploring some dark ideas with a light-hearted touch, which makes them some of my favorite examples of fanservice done right. They're all great. Watch them, read them, like, comment, subscribe, bell. Have a good day. I love you. I am Super Dude. See you in the next one. And now that we're finally at the end, I would like to thank a couple of people for help with this. I had multiple people look over the script because I felt like this one was particularly important to get right, with notable contributions by Annie Crawford, whose Instagram should be on screen. Thank you very much for all your help. And of course, thank you to my patrons for putting money towards me and helping me with all of this. If you would like to be a part of this process and contribute as well, the links are found below and above and everywhere. And that's truly it for the video. Did you like what you saw? Like me? Hate me? Some combination of the three? In which case, feel free to leave a comment. I do read them, and that's kind of it for me. Thank you very, very much, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one. I am Super Dude. Thank you for watching.